My sister texted don't come home, cut me out after I saved our company. 24 hours later, her lawyer called begging and my reply made her cry. Hi, my name's Mara. My sister sent me a text. Just 10 words. Don't come home. No explanation, no goodbye. I had just spent 6 weeks saving the company she was about to sell behind my back. Turns out she didn't just want me gone. She wanted me erased. She forged documents, drained my mother's insurance, and lied to everyone about why I left. But 24 hours later, her lawyer was the one begging me for mercy. I landed at JFK just after noon. The plane had been late leaving Berlin, delayed on the tarmac by fog, and my body was aching from the long haul back across the Atlantic. I'd been gone 6 weeks. 6 exhausting, overbooked, strategy-heavy weeks, working trade expos, late-night dinners with clients, and contract meetings for our family company. I should have felt accomplished, but there was a quiet dread in my chest as I turned my phone off airplane mode. I wasn't expecting a parade, but I did expect something. One text popped up like a stone dropped into still water. Don't come home. Everything is fine now. Don't make it messy. Valora. No hey. No thanks. Just an order. Delivered like she was the only one who mattered. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not moving. Around me, travelers hustled to luggage belts and shuttles, calling their kids, booking rides, normal returns. I just stood there blinking at those 10 words. Valora, my sister, my older sister. She was the one who cried when Dad asked me to take the lead on the company's relaunch after he stepped back. She said I was the golden girl, the one who always swooped in from New York, made everything look easy. I gave up my CEO role for this. I put my career on hold, left behind a stable team, an apartment I loved, and a life I'd worked years to build. And now I was being dismissed like a temp at the end of a summer job. I didn't cry. I didn't text back. I just walked to baggage claim, jaw locked. At the airport cafe, I connected to Wi-Fi. No emails, no Slack messages. When I opened my company dashboard, it didn't load. I tried the backup login. I always used invalid credentials. Every folder, every file gone. I called the office line. Hi, this is Quenby and Company. How may I help you? A voice answered. Young, nervous. I cleared my throat. This is Mara Quenby. Can you transfer me to the operations desk? A pause. Then, I'm sorry, but I was told to refer all operational calls to Miss Valora Haysk. She used Mom's maiden name. Now, no more Quenby. Okay, thank you. I hung up before the girl could apologize again. By the time I got to my hotel in Asheville, one I had booked myself since clearly nobody had planned on hosting me, I'd called 3 more contacts. No one answered. No one called back. I pulled out my personal laptop and accessed my archived drive. Years of work, strategic plans, equity evaluations, debt structure models, all mine, all tied to my login. I typed in the business registry code. A loading wheel spun then stopped. Quenby managing member, Haysk. No mention of me. No secondary officers. No pending amendments. No record of my role. It was like I'd never been part of the business. She hadn't just locked me out. She'd erased me. I stared at the screen. I felt hollow. Not angry. Not hurt. Exactly. Just hollow like air where something solid used to be. Back when I first agreed to help, Valora cried. Said she was drowning. Said I was the only one who understood the company's soul. I didn't hesitate. I dropped everything. I worked 16-hour days rebuilding the product pipeline, renegotiating our shipping contracts, securing grants from artisan co-ops. I had spreadsheets timestamped at 2:47 a.m. emails confirming supplier agreements, even my own handwriting on the master plan sketch hanging in the boardroom, but my name, that was gone. I checked the state tax filings. She had submitted a new EIN registration under a holding company she owned. The Quimby name still appeared on the storefront, but behind the curtain, it was all hers. I took a long shower that night. I didn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I sat at the edge of the bed, laptop open on my knees. The light was dim, blue, casting shadows across the beige carpet. I stared at a photo of our original board meeting, me and Valora side by side. We looked happy. Maybe we were. Maybe that was real for a moment. But now, I whispered to no one. I wasn't supposed to stay. I was supposed to save it. And I did. I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal or the fact that I saw it coming months ago, but still believed we were better than this. When the sun started bleeding through the cheap motel curtains, I still hadn't moved from the edge of the bed. The photo of me and Valora was still up on the screen, me smiling like I had something solid beneath my feet, her hand lightly resting on my shoulder. I clicked it shut, stood, stretched my neck, and grabbed my keys. There wasn't a plan, only instinct. The cab dropped me off in front of my old apartment building. Our building, technically, on Claremont Street. The place looked the same. Same brittle lawn chairs by the entry. Same scent of cedar oil from the lobby diffuser we insisted we use to make it feel boutique. I rode the elevator to the 5th floor, already fishing for my keys. My hands moved by memory, but my chest was tight. I stopped outside Unit 512, the one with the sun-facing window I used to love in the late afternoons. I slid the key in. It didn't turn. I tried again, still jammed. I knocked. Nothing. After standing there for 2 full minutes, silent, stupid, exposed, I took the elevator back down and asked the building manager if something had gone wrong with the lock. He squinted at me like I was some door-to-door rep. "You're Mara, right?" I nodded. "That unit's been released. New tenant moved in last week." My mouth went dry. "Excuse me? Didn't Valora tell you? I assumed you'd been informed." I laughed under my breath. Not from humor, just to keep from breaking. No, she didn't." He looked uncomfortable. "Sorry. I think there's a box for you in the mailroom." It was labeled miscellaneous. A cracked photo frame, a handful of old business cards, a manila folder with my original pitch for the Quimby relaunch, creased as if someone had thumbed through it without care. That was all. "Where's the rest of it?" I asked him. He hesitated. "Some was claimed by the company. The rest I think had sent to storage or donated." That's what I was told. "Of course she did," I said. On the sidewalk outside, I stood with that flimsy box in my arms while the wind picked up around my ankles. I stared up at my old window. My curtains were gone, replaced with floral beige ones that looked like something she would pick. I bet she gave the new tenant a discount just to erase my name from the buzzer. Later that afternoon, I drove out to a cousin's baby shower. Not because I wanted to celebrate, but because I needed to see someone, anyone who hadn't been given the Valora version of me. The event was at a small community center by the river. Finger foods on plastic platters, balloons, pastel cupcakes. Valora was already there. She wore pale pink, her hair pinned just right, smiling like she'd just closed a billion-dollar deal. She waved at a group of our aunts and said something with her back turned to me. Then I heard it. She came back. "Yes," she said, glancing over her shoulder without looking directly at me. But it was too much for her. "You know, Mara, she's never been the family type." Laughter rippled gently, like gossip in a church hall. "She left again, didn't she?" Someone muttered. I heard Valora had to rebuild the whole thing from scratch. Another voice chimed in. My jaw clenched. I didn't speak. I didn't correct. I just stood there smiling tight, cheeks burning, and reached for a cookie I didn't want. On the drive back, I didn't play music. The car was quiet except for the turn signals and the faint rattling of the box in the seat beside me. Somewhere between the third red light and my exit ramp, I stopped thinking about the words they said. I started thinking about the strategy behind them. Valora wasn't just removing me from the business. She was rewriting the narrative, repainting me as flaky, soft, unreliable, a liability, not a leader. And she knew exactly how to do it with a smile, with practiced grief, with phrases like, "She just needed time," or "Some people can't handle pressure." That night, back at the motel, I opened my laptop and stared at my archived financial documents, spreadsheets, memos, invoices. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just started categorizing the files, color-coding the ones with timestamps, tagging the ones that would matter in court. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was building leverage. She thinks I ran away. Let her. What I'm about to do requires silence. By morning, the motel room was filled with a dull amber glow. I hadn't slept. Just sat there methodically sifting through every document I'd saved over the years. Every revision, every funding request, every bank transfer I'd signed off on. I wasn't searching for revenge. I was verifying the history she'd rewritten. Halfway through my second coffee, I found it. A transfer labeled Emergency Operational Float. $60,000. My money wired from my personal account at First National to Quenby and Company's vendor fund during the worst quarter we'd ever had. No documentation acknowledged me. I pulled up the matching internal memo. Valora had logged it as temporary family assistance, unallocated, no mention of the source, no mention of me. That wire had kept the lights on. It had paid half the overdue salaries when our production lead threatened to walk. And I remember clearly. I didn't ask for payback, but I damn sure didn't ask to be erased either. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling like it held the next clue. The silence in that motel was heavier than any courtroom I'd ever faced, and I'd been in a few. Next, I opened the file for the power of attorney Valora insisted I sign before leaving for Berlin. I remember the lunch clearly, her fake casual tone, the way she said, "It's just a precaution. You'll be out of the country. What if we need to approve something urgent?" At the time, I didn't think twice. I trusted her. That was my first mistake. Now, I compared it side by side with the version currently on file with the state registry. Different timestamp, different notary, different IP. Her version authorized full execution of ownership decisions. Mine was limited, strictly operational. She forged it. I stared at the signatures like they were written in another language. That wasn't just strategy. That was theft with legal implications. I needed someone who didn't flinch at this kind of thing. I called Elias. He answered on the second ring, voice clipped and alert. I was wondering how long it would take. "I need your eyes on a document," I said. "And I need discretion. You know how I operate, Mara." I sent the files within minutes. He didn't talk much after that. Just read, clicked, scanned, breathed. "This isn't a bad forgery," he said. "It's a lazy one. That's better for us." "What's my exposure?" I asked. "You're clean." "She's not. But you're not going to win this in the press or through pity. You're going to win this with precision. And I don't go public until you're ready." That was the thing with Elias. He didn't reassure. He calculated. He was a scalpel, not a sword. We hung up. I sat with that silence again. And then I dialed. It rang longer than I expected. She picked up with a flat, quiet tone. "Well, I figured you'd call eventually." "I found the transfer," I said. "The 60 grand I wired." A pause, then. "I never asked you to pay anything. Maybe you just needed to feel useful." My breath caught for a moment. Not because I was hurt. Because I was stunned by how neatly she sliced the truth into something she could live with. "You're going to regret that," I said. My voice didn't rise. It never does when I mean what I say. She laughed softly. "You always were so dramatic." And with that, I hung up. I stared at the phone, heart steady, not broken, not even cracked. There's a particular kind of stillness that comes before someone takes back what's theirs. It isn't rage. It's math. It's memory. It's momentum. I reopened the folder labeled Founding Documents. Reread every agreement Dad made before he handed us the reins. I pulled up invoices tied to the relaunch strategy, the ones I drafted at 2 in the morning while she was booking her spa weekends and scheduling press interviews. She wanted the company to herself. Fine, but she wasn't going to steal it and pretend I never existed. She signed my name like it meant nothing. Let's see how she reacts when I reclaim it. By sunrise, I was dressed and on my third cup of coffee, staring at a blinking cursor on my screen. No need for caffeine. I was already sharp. Every document had been lined up, sorted, numbered. My lawyer, Elias, was reviewing the forged power of attorney as we spoke. But I wasn't waiting for his green light. A junior staffer named Lindsay, who I once mentored, had texted me just before dawn. FYI, they're holding a closed board meeting at 10 a.m. Thought you should know. No calendar invite, no formal notice, but I still had rights, even if she pretended otherwise. I pulled up the company's bylaws. Article 6, Section 4. Any founding member, regardless of executive standing, retains observational and objection rights in cases involving structural changes. Valora must have skipped that clause in her rush to take over. By 9:15, I was parked in front of Quenby and Company headquarters, watching board members trickle in. No one looked my way. I walked in through the side door, the one I used to prop open for delivery crews when we couldn't afford full staff. The same door she once told me to stop using because it looked too working class. The elevator ride to the 6th floor was silent except for the sound of my pulse. I reached the boardroom just as the door was starting to close behind one of the financial advisors. I caught it with one hand and stepped inside. 7 heads turned, one smile froze mid-expression. Valora stood at the front of the room, papers in hand mid-sentence. She recovered quickly, her voice dipping into that honeyed tone she used when she wanted to appear gracious. "Mara," she said. "I don't think your name was on today's guest list." I smiled back, cool and easy. "Maybe not on your list, but I'm still in the ledger." The room went quiet. The legal counsel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Someone cleared their throat. The man beside the window took off his glasses and cleaned them, avoiding my eyes. I walked to the side table, poured myself a cup of lukewarm coffee, and took a seat at the far end of the table. No one stopped me. Valora looked down at her folder, shuffled some papers, and continued. "As I was saying, in light of Mara's departure, it's become clear that streamlining our leadership is in the company's best interest. We're proposing full consolidation under my sole direction." She made it sound so neat, so generous, as if I'd simply lost interest and drifted away. I waited until she was done talking. Then with deliberate calm, I slid a folder toward the center of the table. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't grandstand. "Before we move forward," I said, "I have a question." Valora's jaw tensed. "Of course. Who notarized the power of execution document that gave you majority authority?" She blinked. "That was handled internally through counsel." "Funny," I said, flipping the first page. "Because this is the notarized version I signed and this," I pulled out the altered copy, "is the version filed with the state. Different notary, different date, different terms." Silence. I handed out printed copies, timestamps, notary registration numbers. Elias had triple-checked everything. This wasn't a theory. This was fact. One of the board members, a man named Greg, who'd known my father, looked over the pages with narrowed eyes. "Valora," he said slowly. "Can you explain this discrepancy?" She straightened, lips tightening. "This is a distraction. Mara's been upset since she left. She's trying to stir things up because she couldn't handle the responsibility." I looked directly at her. "I didn't come here to destroy anything. I came here to remind you and them who built it back from the edge." She scoffed. "You were gone." "No," I said. "I was working, securing our future while you were booking press interviews and private stylists. I was putting in the hours no one saw." The tension in the room shifted. This wasn't just about documents anymore. This was about truth and who had earned the right to speak it. Greg placed his hand on the table. I think we should pause the vote. There's clearly more to review. Valora opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her eyes flicked toward the legal counsel, who now seemed very interested in his notebook. The meeting was adjourned. I didn't gloat. I didn't speak again. I gathered my folder, gave a polite nod, and walked out. Outside, the air smelled like fall, wood smoke, and damp leaves. I stood on the steps of the building for a moment, letting the cold settle into my chest. She thought she'd removed me from the table. She forgot I built the table. As I stepped off the front steps of Quenby and Company, I didn't head straight to the car. Instead, I walked down the block, letting the wind scrape against my jaw while my thoughts rearranged themselves. The meeting had cracked something open. But it wasn't over. Valora wouldn't stop just because she'd been caught off guard. She didn't retreat. She retaliated. And if I'd learned anything from our shared childhood, it was this. She always had a second move waiting behind the curtain. I was halfway through a lukewarm sandwich back at the motel when my phone buzzed. It was a name I hadn't seen in a while. Charles Denton, former client, soft-spoken, smart, invested in our woodcraft division before Valora ever walked into her first strategy meeting. The message was short. You have 5 minutes. I called him instantly. He picked up on the first ring. Mara, I didn't know how to bring this up, but you need to hear it. Go on. She's shopping your company around. Ridgeport Holdings quietly behind the board's back. That name hit me like a slap. Ridgeport wasn't just competition. They were predators waiting for our debts to outweigh our legacy, circling for years. They once tried to lure me away with a salary I could have retired on. I turned them down because I believed in the name above the door. My name. She's already signed a preliminary intent, Charles continued. No press release, no shareholder meeting, just private lawyers and quiet terms. I sat back in the chair, sandwich untouched. Do you know when it started? He hesitated. The paperwork started moving the same week you left for Berlin. Of course it did. I thanked him and hung up. For the next 2 hours, I combed through archived files from a backdoor server I still had limited access to. Valora probably didn't even realize the login still worked. One of the old testing domains we used when building the new client portal. Buried in a folder labeled Old Ops were 3 PDFs, NDAs, asset evaluations, and a term sheet. She wasn't reacting to my absence. She had engineered it. I stared at the screen, hands trembling slightly, not from shock, but from calculation. This wasn't business. This was betrayal with a profit margin. It was late afternoon by the time I got Elias on the phone. He sounded more awake than I felt. She's consolidating. I told him quietly. Ridgeport. There was a pause. I figured something like this was coming. He said, what Valora is doing is called a shadow reallocation. If she succeeds, you won't be fighting her anymore. You'll be fighting a boardroom full of strangers who don't care about your history. Then we stop her. I said. Elias didn't laugh, but I could hear the nod in his voice. We'll need to move fast and clean. No public drama. You hit her legally and quietly. Same game she's playing. I opened a blank document and began drafting the objection letter, invoking my rights as a founding member, citing shareholder bylaws, and referencing the power of attorney fraud as grounds for pausing any sale. I included backup documentation, hard copies of everything Valora had tried to hide. And then I made one final move. I forwarded the letter to Ridgeport Holdings, not to their legal department, to their acquisitions director. The subject line was simple, urgent, due diligence concern regarding Quenby Company. Within 20 minutes, I received a read receipt. Nothing more, but I didn't need a reply. I knew how these people worked. Ridgeport wouldn't touch a scandal, especially one that could burn them in a shareholder lawsuit. She wanted to build her empire on forged foundations. Fine. Let's see how interested they are when they realize she forged the house she's trying to sell. The next morning, I brought my laptop to a cafe a few blocks off Main, the kind with cheap coffee and quiet booths no one lingers in too long. I liked it because no one there cared who I was or who I used to be. I pulled up my inbox just in time to see the subject line. Ridgeport withdraws from acquisition process. I didn't open it right away. I just let the words sit there. Quiet confirmation that my shot across the bow had landed. I took a sip of coffee that tasted more like burnt water and watched the rain powder against the window. The phone buzzed next to me. Blocked number. I let it ring twice, then answered. A familiar voice came through, smooth but tight. Merrick Dre, Valoris longtime attorney. The man who once sent me a cease and desist letter on Christmas Eve. Mara, he said, skipping any pleasantries. We'd like to propose a meeting. I waited. No press, no official correspondence, he added quickly. Just you, Valora, and myself. We think there's a way to resolve this discreetly. I set my cup down slow and deliberate. You don't call to resolve when you're ahead, Merrick. He sighed. We're all adults here. There's no need to drag this into a mess. Then you should have thought of that before she sold the company out from under me. She was under the impression she forged legal documents. I interrupted. That's not an impression. That's a felony. There was a long pause. He didn't deny it. Instead, he lowered his voice. Can we agree to meet tomorrow? No, I said. I'm done meeting. And I hung up. I stayed in that booth a while longer, the rain easing into drizzle. That kind of silence after a call like that didn't feel like relief. It felt like smoke after something's already burned. When I got back to the motel, there was an envelope waiting at the front desk. No return address, just my name written in block letters. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Scanned copy of a financial transaction. The sender, an anonymous whistleblower. The account, a Shell LLC in Colorado. The money pulled from a long-term care policy. The name on the policy, Odessa Quenby. My mother. The transaction had been dated 3 weeks before Mom's last health scare. While Valora was giving interviews about family legacy, she was pulling money meant for our mother's care to fund personal real estate projects. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, the paper shaking in my hands. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was theft from a woman who had spent her life holding us together with grace and casseroles and silent sacrifices. A woman who trusted her daughter to protect her, not profit off her. I called Elias, he picked up instantly. I'm forwarding you something, I said, my voice low. It's about Mom. Minutes later, he confirmed it. It's enough. More than enough. This isn't sloppy accounting. This is criminal exposure. Let's hold, I said. Why? Elias asked, surprised. Because right now she still thinks she's got time to maneuver. Let's give her a choice. Mara, I'm not doing this to crush her. I'm doing this so she knows exactly what line she crossed. I want her to feel it before the lawyers get involved. He went quiet, then said. Understood. That night, I opened a new document. I drafted a cease and desist letter citing misuse of funds, forgery, and fiduciary violations. I attached copies of the Ridgeport withdrawal notice, the financial transfer from Mom's policy, and a screenshot of the falsified power of attorney. Then I wrote one sentence, just one. You didn't just steal from me, you stole from Mom. I addressed it not to her lawyer, not to the board. I sent it to her personal email, the one I used to send birthday invitations from when we were kids. I stared at the screen for a full minute before hitting send. It went without a ping, without a reply. But the silence afterward, it wasn't peace. It was something sharper, like the quiet before a courtroom doors open. The silence that followed my email didn't soothe me. It coiled around everything, tight, charged, expectant. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like waiting for something to detonate. 3 days passed. No response, no legal threat, not even a vague PR statement, just a vacuum. On the fourth morning, a thick envelope arrived at Elias's office. It had been sent through private courier. No return address, but inside. His assistant recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from my father. Elias scanned it, then forwarded it to me with a simple subject line, "For your eyes only." I read it sitting in my car outside the lawyer's office, the heater still running, engine idling. The letter was handwritten, blue ink on cream stationery. My father's penmanship hadn't changed since I was 9. He wrote, "Mara, I watched you rebuild this company when we were too tired to care, too proud to admit we didn't know what we were doing. You worked in silence. You never asked for credit. I let Valora take the spotlight because I thought it would make peace. I stayed quiet because I didn't want more conflict. That silence, that was my failure. If you're reading this, it means you didn't walk away. Good. The business is yours and everything but ink. And that's fixable, Dad." I read it twice, then folded it gently and slid it back into the envelope. Not even a month later, the second blow came. It was a Tuesday evening when I got the call. Mom had been admitted to the hospital. Minor stroke. I left everything and drove straight there. The lights in the hallway buzzed overhead as I signed in at the front desk. "I see you. Room 417. She was awake when I arrived, pale, thin. Her hand looked smaller than I remembered, tucked into the edge of the blanket. The nurse said she had moments of clarity, but the damage had made her tired. I pulled a chair close, resting my hand over hers. When her eyes opened, they didn't flinch. "Mara," she whispered. "I'm here," I said. A pause. "Then, you were always here, even when you weren't." I bit down the lump in my throat. She looked toward the window. "We let you carry everything. I just thought if we didn't talk about it, maybe it would hurt less." "It didn't," I said quietly. "It just left bruises in places no one could see." She squeezed my fingers. Weak but real. That night, I sat by her bedside until dawn. Valora never showed. The next morning, as I was heading out of the hospital parking lot, Elias called. "I ran a background inquiry like you asked," he said. "And there's something you need to see." He emailed me a PDF, 1 page, clean, tidy, a $120,000 business loan issued 3 years ago. My name, my signature, my SSN. I never signed it. Valora had. She forged the loan in my name to secure a short-term expansion project she didn't want the board to know about. Paid it off, buried the paperwork, never expected I'd see it. I sat in my car reading it over and over, not out of disbelief, but because I wanted to burn the way it felt into my memory. She really thought I wouldn't come back. Later that evening, I drove to her house. She answered the door in a silk robe, face tight, but composed. "Didn't expect you," she said flatly. "I'm not here for theatrics," I replied. "I want you to look me in the eye while I say this." She opened the door wider, wordless. I stepped inside, handed her the envelope, Dad's letter, then the printed loan document, then a copy of the hospital transfer. She didn't even try to deny them. Instead, she stared down at the papers, then said, "I did what I had to do." I let that hang in the air. "You stole from your own mother," I said, voice even. "You signed my name to protect your deals, and you call that survival." She shrugged. "It's just business." I took a breath, then said the only thing left to say. "So will I." Then I turned and walked out, not waiting for her to follow, not looking back. She said nothing as I left, but silence from Valora always meant she was planning something worse. It was barely past noon the next day when a package arrived at the front desk of my motel, thick, unmarked, and hand-delivered. The clerk gave it to me like it might explode. I took it upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed before opening it. Inside, a flash drive, a typed note, and a business card I hadn't seen in years. Lois Trenholm, our former senior accountant, retired, quiet. She never involved herself in the family drama, always stayed late and always spoke with numbers, not emotion. The note was only one line. "You may want to hear this. I plugged the drive into my laptop and clicked play. There were no visuals, just audio. It was a recording from a meeting held 18 months ago. My voice came through first, clear, deliberate. I was presenting the financial rescue strategy I'd written during the worst months. Supplier negotiations, payroll restructuring, inventory liquidation. Then Valora spoke. I don't think we need to go that deep. People don't want to hear about losses, they want confidence. Someone else agreed with her. Then silence, a pause, and then another clip played. One from 6 weeks later. Valora, presenting the same ideas, word for word, but under her name. The same strategy one had been told was too complex, was now being touted as her brilliance. I closed the laptop and sat very still. It wasn't just theft. It was theft with applause. That afternoon, the flash drive made its way to the board. I didn't send it anonymously. I attached my name to it. Truth doesn't need camouflage. Later that evening, while I was sipping tea in the small rental's kitchen, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Finian, Valora's son, standing there, hoodie up, hands buried in his jacket. Can I come in? I stepped aside. He didn't sit. Just stood near the counter, shifting from foot to foot. She told me not to talk to you, he said. I nodded. I figured. He pulled out his phone and tapped it open. I recorded something. I shouldn't have, but I couldn't unhear it. He pressed play. Valora's voice again, this time sharper, more private. If she ever finds out the full truth, she'll tear this whole family apart. That's why we're not telling her. Do you understand me? Fine looked up. She said she used your name once, but I think it was more than once. I didn't speak. I let the recording finish. Then I looked him in the eyes. You're not responsible for her choices, Finn. He swallowed hard. I'm just tired of pretending. I nodded. So am I. 2 days later, I got the call I had hoped would never come. Mom had passed in her sleep. Peaceful, the nurse said, just slipped away. No pain, no struggle. I didn't cry. Not right away. At the reading of her will, the room felt colder than it should have. Valora sat across from me, hair pulled back too tight, eyes unreadable. The lawyer, a thin man with a voice like dry leaves, read the document slowly. All remaining assets of Quenby and Company as well as the Quenby family home and all associated accounts are to be transferred to Mara Quenby, he paused. I trust her with the name, he added, quoting directly. Valora didn't flinch. She didn't protest, but her silence said more than shouting ever could. I didn't look at her. Instead, I closed my eyes and took a breath that felt both heavy and clean. I hadn't asked for it, but Mom knew. She knew who showed up, who stayed, who carried the weight no one wanted to acknowledge. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, I walked the perimeter of the company lot. The warehouse lights flickered on automatically. I stopped at the back wall where our father once carved the Quenby crest into brick. Valora's name had been scraped from the brass plate by the door. Not by me, by someone inside. I never asked who did it. The day after the will was read, Valora packed her things and left town. No farewell, no announcement, just gone. Some said she'd moved to Atlanta. Others whispered she was staying with a friend until she figured out her next move. The board moved quickly. They restored my access, updated the public listings, and quietly removed any references to Valora from marketing materials. No drama, just procedure. Fine stayed with me that fall. Said he wanted to finish the semester without being in hiding. I didn't press for more. We ate breakfast in silence most mornings and that was enough. I didn't need to win. I just needed the noise to stop. And finally, it had. 2 weeks after the will was executed, I sat in my father's old office with the door halfway closed. I hadn't officially moved into it, though the name played outside now bore mine. His books were still on the shelf. His paperweight still sat like a sentinel on the corner of the desk. A hunk of steel with the Quenby crest engraved in it. I didn't move anything, I wasn't ready. The hallway outside buzzed with the usual rhythm of operations. Boots crossing linoleum, printers humming, hushed conversations about supply chains and shipping schedules. Inside, though, it was quiet. Too quiet. I watched the light from the blinds stripe the desk. I wasn't waiting for anything in particular, just letting the moment land. No celebration, no announcement, just the stillness of something earned, not seized. People had started knocking softly before entering now. Not because they were afraid, but because they weren't sure what I expected. I didn't bark orders. I didn't swing power like a weapon. Maybe they didn't know what to do with that. But I was learning to live in that silence, letting it breathe. That afternoon, I walked the halls of the main building like a guest. I paused near the old HR office where Valora once demanded they take down a portrait of our grandmother. Said it dated the brand. The picture had since been restored. No one had mentioned it aloud. Someone just put it back. I didn't ask who. Later that week, word spread that Valora had left Asheville for good. No formal resignation, no goodbye email. She simply vanished from the company's directory. Some said she went south. Others claimed she was staying with an old friend near the coast. No one from the board asked if I wanted to pursue charges. And I didn't. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because dragging her name through another legal process wouldn't fix what had already broken. Fine stayed on until graduation. Quiet kid. Smart. We had coffee most mornings. He liked it black with too much sugar. He never asked to talk about his mom and I never forced it. Some days he offered to help around the office. Some days he just sat with me during lunch, headphones in, presence solid, the kind of company I hadn't realized I missed. One Saturday, I drove back to the house. The family home sat just as we'd left it. Porch still creaking, roses overgrown on the side wall. I didn't go inside to reminisce. I walked through each room, not to chase memories, but to acknowledge them. There were no tears, just a quiet sort of understanding. What was good here had already left with my parents. I didn't take anything. Instead, I wrote a short note and left it on the kitchen table. It said only, I held it together. It's time for me to let go. On the way out, I locked the door behind me and dropped the key into the mailbox slot. The following Monday, I returned to the office early. No one was there yet. I carried a small box into the boardroom. The same space where she once said I'd never belong in. The walls had been freshly painted. A new table, custom built, now stood where the old one had splintered from years of abuse. I placed my red notebook in the center of it. That notebook had followed me through every phase of the company's rebirth. It held handwritten budgets, staff notes, pitch outlines, even my own therapy scribbles on nights when I thought I was losing my mind. Valora once said, "You're not strong enough to lead." She was wrong. I wasn't strong in her way. I didn't bulldoze. I built. I sat down in the chair at the head of the table. Not because I needed to prove something, but because no one else had earned it. I ran my fingers across the grain of the wood. Sleek, strong, clean lines, just like I designed it. I looked around at the empty room. No applause, no ceremony. And I whispered to no one in particular. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the noise to stop. And now it has. Justice didn't roar. It whispered. And I finally heard it.